How did self-protection change from 2001 to 2005? What were the elements that drove those changes? My name is Jamie Clubb. If you enjoy the content of this video, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. 2001 to 2005 saw some major changes that were already set in place during the 1990s. The previous decade had been relatively peaceful compared to what would happen in the 2000s. However, during the 1990s, some of the biggest paradigm shifts have occurred in the self-protection world and the martial arts world. The Ultimate Fighting Championship had driven people to question the effectiveness of certain martial arts methods. The likes of Jeff Thompson in the UK and prior to him Tony Blauer in the United States had driven a need to train martial arts more pragmatically. The 1990s heralded modernist approaches, and entire systems such as the Spanish-English KZ fighting method, later KZ by Justo and Defense Lab, were pushed to the forefront of martial arts media in the early 2000s. This was also the era that saw the Israeli combative system adapted for civilians known as Krav Maga gain global mainstream acceptance as a modern martial art. It helped that fictional media was also taking an interest in these apparently grittier and more up-to-date schools of combat. The early 2000s saw big-budget feature films readily infuse action scenes with the stylistic portrayals of 21st century martial arts. Was the idea already becoming an institution?
Man has an idea. The idea attracts others, like-minded. The idea expands. The idea becomes an institution.
Respected teachers like the USA's Hock Hockheim and the UK's Mo Teague began to push harder for what looked like a second reality revolution, especially since violent crime was now on the rise and their good work was finally getting its just acknowledgement. However, very quickly martial arts subculture and industry, not to mention society in general, clamoured for the need for systemised approaches made more accessible for those who accepted the ritualised trappings of tradition. Just as belt factories have become the running in-joke throughout the corporate world of McDojos, so we saw the dawn of the instructor mill. Many of the reality-based self-defense methods doled out instructor certificates at their seminars. On the plus side, the mainstream rise of skepticism and critical thinking inspired others to publicly question the effectiveness of systems, new and old. Meanwhile, traditional martial arts pragmatists like Ian Abernethy and Gavin Mulholland in karate, Alan Gibson and Dave Fenton in Wing Chun promoted a re-evaluation of the past. They proved not only on the intended need for progression laid down by the early 20th century pioneers of their arts, but also that much of what was being taught to the masses and subsequently debunked under pressure was, in fact, relatively very new elements and readaptations not contained in the foundation art. Then there are others still who look to old combative systems of World War II pioneers like Fairbairn and Sykes, and either helped maintain their continued teaching or sought to totally resurrect extinct systems via the treatises and manuals left. This saw the parallel emergence of historical restoration martial arts intended for warfare of bygone years and modernist interpretations of more recent disbanded combatives or self-defense systems. Terrorism, both in the form of domestic terrorism and international terrorism, impacted greatly on society. Even before the 9/11 suicide attacks that would go on to define the entire decade, if not the century up to the present time, the previous decade has seen signs of different types of terrorist attacks. Mass killings targeting institutions, especially schools, has a long history. In the US, the earliest incident was the Enoch Brown School massacre that occurred on the 26th of July 1764 and is often considered by many to be a terrorist attack. Given that many mass killers who commit this type of crime provide rather obscure motives, if any, it's not always easy to determine whether they were inspired by an ideology shared by others or a personal delusion. From a self-protection perspective, a huge amount of data was collected on typical offender profiles and the most common causes. This had both positive and negative effects in the 2000s. Better self-protection teachers began to focus more than ever on researching, learning and teaching awareness of pre-incident indicators. This was something that Jeff Thompson had noticed in the previous decade when he updated his more hard skills focused real self-defense book into the far more comprehensive Dead or Alive, where pre-attack rituals and behaviours were included in addition to more detailed safety tips. 1997 had also seen the publication of perhaps the most influential and revered soft skills self-protection book, the best-selling The Gift of Fear by Gavin de Becker in the USA. De Becker looked more at the deceptive pre-incident indicators of human predators, but also went into a lot of detail on spotting potential mass killers who might target institutions such as disgruntled ex-employees. Sadly, such fears also bred a siege-like mentality in certain martial arts groups. Awareness turned to borderline paranoia, proactive attitudes became prejudicial. Many self-protection teachers believed that the best defence they could offer against such huge threats was to inspire militarism. After a rise in mass shootings during the 1980s and even into the early 90s, there had been a steep decline in such incidents. However, mass killings in schools continued, and the 1999 Columbine High School massacre resulted in what became known as the Columbine effect, that would cast a huge shadow over the next century, and a worrying growing reoccurrence of such crimes. There was a growing concern that youth offenders were getting younger and younger. More children were being involved in violent crime, both as targets and as perpetrators. This was around the time that I developed my children's self-protection program. At the end of this vlog's designated time period, the UK also saw the first recognised links between youth violent crime and social media. This came in the form of the happy slapping trend that began in late 2004 in the South London borough of Lewisham. The crime involved assaulting a victim, filming the event and distributing it over the internet. These crimes started as offensive yet minor pranks whereby the perpetrator slapped a random victim, but the crimes soon escalated to mugging and acts of grievous bodily harm. Although it was considered to be a UK crime trend, similar incidents would occur in France, Scandinavia and Australia, providing an early example of how violent crime and antisocial behaviour could be encouraged, facilitated and motivated by social media. Meanwhile, the growth of the internet and the emergence of the dark web provided child abusers with a powerful new tool. Minors could be groomed online and abusers could find a far greater network of enablers. Furthermore, organised crime in the form of sex trafficking now had a more efficient way to facilitate illegal activities. As the digital age became established and grew at a rapid rate, 21st century self-protection teachers would soon have to face the reality of a world of new technology. Devices such as mobile phones would become undeniable elements in the lives of most people, helping to both soften victims and to organise or motivate predators. So what are your views on self-protection in the early 2000s? What occurred between 2001 and 2005 that you think greatly shaped the development of self-protection? What were the good things? What were the bad things? What are the lessons that we can learn from that period that could help impact on our training today? I look forward to reading your thoughts in the comments section. Thank you.